I love your work, Dan. I think you're brilliant. I'm a total fan.
I think you're such a legend.
And I think what you're doing is really offering
You're doing
a
God's
paradigm
work.
shift.
Whatever God you're into, you're doing God's work.
I agree to that.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think God is love. I feel quite confident about that more than I feel confident about anything else through different experience.
I was saying it to Steve when we were out walking, like we're identical twins and we were out walking, and I was saying, what I like about you is you laugh like someone that doesn't you laugh like someone that has with or without you energy, that has that sense of equanimity, that sense of, well, if it happens, great, and if it doesn't, it's still, we got to enjoy the journey. Like genuinely, from listening to you over the last couple of days, it was like you have a lovely, like there's a spiritual essence to you that feels like you're like, yeah, hopefully it works, hopefully it doesn't. Patience, sure, it's a journey.
I'm going to keep doing what I can to the best of my ability, but you can't be attached. Or I guess you can, but I don't think it helps.
I think that's on the money there.
Yeah. Well, this is great. Chris is here with us as well. He's sitting over the other side of the room, and he's runs our farm. He's the head farmer. So we've got a 4-acre regenerative farm. So this is like
this morning I had the refractometer out. And I was trying to measure the brick score on some chard this morning. I was having a great time trying to work out how the hell to calibrate it, but I got there in the end. But I don't think I got an accurate reading. But tomorrow.
It was lower than you think it should be, or what?
It was higher. 18 for chard, which is pretty much like jelly tots level.
That would be brilliant if you had 18 in chard. Would you actually get a drop of juice out? What did you use to squish it?
I mashed it in a pestle and mortar and then put it through muslin and squeezed a bit of juice out of it.
I think that's probably why. I think you
better off
if you have
it.
No pressing it. You don't want any of the flesh into the juice. You just want the sap.
Okay, so it's just the liquid.
Mortar and pestle. You usually, I mean, we when we sell them for our kit, there's like it's a vice grips, a modified vice grips, and so there's I can go get one and show you if you want.
Wow, so it's just a little,
you squish it.
Or a garlic press. Sometimes people will take a garlic press and they'll stick a little penny in it, and so the pulp doesn't come out. But I'll show you the squisher we have.
Okay, cool. Nice. The squisher, I love it. This is good. This is practical. A squisher.
It's a modified vice grip.
Oh, it is.
And there's just like metal pieces that are welded onto it, top and bottom. And you put something in the back there, and the juice comes out, and it's just the juice, and it will never break.
Wow, that's practical.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, we could do that. That's
got common over dime a dozen, but a good squisher now.
Squisher, I like the technical term. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Press. We call it a bricks press.
Okay,
but,
that's better. Bricks press sounds more technical than a squisher. I like the squisher sounds like a baddie out of a Roald Dahl book. The squisher out of the BFG.
Oh, was a brilliant writer.
Yeah, some cracking ones.
Yeah, really.
How's life as a homesteader? Are you still homesteading?
This is my homestead here.
Good.
Well, this is the stove I built out of but the homestead, I can see the homestead.
Well done.
Yeah.
How many years? That's a good load of years, isn't
it? Since we bought this place was in basically 2009, so 15 years.
Well done.
Yeah, got a wreck of a place, old rundown house and barn, 1880 house and barn. The house was a tear down. The barn was condemned. It was like not worth the from a taxes standpoint. It was the value of the land minus the disposal cost of the buildings was what it was considered to be worth.
Wow.
And because I said, looks like it just needs to be rebuilt. And so, so I had practical skills and was in the right time in the right moment, and took a wreck. And now I'm, basically self-sufficient. I have my own land and own it outright. And my expenses are really, really low. And, I'm massively empowered by not having to work for anybody because I don't need much money, which means I can do what I want to do, which I highly recommend and hope to support people who want to do that as much as possible, because being independent on your own land is ideally we belong to the land, but one step short of that is actually, I think Thomas Jefferson called it yeomanry, the people who were able to be independent and self-sufficient on their own land didn't have to answer to anyone, didn't have to kiss anybody's butt, didn't have to sell themselves out because they were independent and self-sufficient, and they could think about long-term priorities because they had that tenure, that autonomy that they could be considering handing on to their children. And so I think one of the travesties of this quote unquote developed world is a lot of people don't have that tenure.
Yeah, most of us are slaves to the machine.
And how can you be empowered if you're, they has got your short and curlies in a twist. So
that was one thing I was wondering was that, and you've answered it already, was that the fact that the Bionutrient Food Association, the Bionutrient Institute, you've set them up as, not for profits. And then even all your research is open source, that is not like business practice nowadays is hold on to everything, hold on to patent it, so I can make a profit out of it. Whereas now that I under the context of where you're coming from, I can understand why you are so open about it and so, publicly benefiting society with it, having a societal perspective rather than a self-individualistic perspective on it.
Well, I mean, I've got a lot of privilege. So they say people that have privilege should do something with it. I think the most selfish thing you can do is surround yourself with empowered people. So it's totally in my interest for as many people as possible to be empowered, because that'll, improve the nature of my life and my children's life and everything else.
Brilliant. Yeah, really, really cool.
Depending on how you define selfishness, it's totally selfish.
Yeah.
It's 100%.
Yeah,
it depends on where you draw the line in terms of selfish, because some people would perceive selfish as sitting there eating ice cream, watching movies, whereas other people would perceive selfish as, well, I'm giving away loads of stuff and I'm being nice to people because ultimately it's the most selfish thing because it makes me feel good. So everyone's kind of context is kind of different within that word.
We started one of Ireland's first juice bars back in about 2005 and literally have been juicing for over 30 years. It's one of the quickest way to rebuild your immune system and literally get the essence of any fruit and veg. It's something I do regularly to ensure that my kids are getting more fruit and veg and more high nutrient dense foods.
Yeah, we've partnered with a company called Nama Juicers. They make incredible quality juicers. They've innovated the standard juicer. It's an upright masticating juicer with a hopper. That means that you can juice hands-free. So you simply load the fruit and veg up the top and you don't have to, you just step away and it juices itself. It makes super high quality juice where the pulp literally comes out dry and it's easy to clean. They come with a 15-year warranty. They're offering you 10% off with the code HAPPYPAIR10. That's simply go to namawell.com, use the code HAPPYPAIR10 for 10% off at the checkout.
Wonderful juicer, couldn't recommend them more. We're all about nature, health, and living a natural way of life. Back about 8 years ago, a friend, Tony Riddle, suggested I have a pair of shoes, lads, that are going to transform your life. And it's like, go away, Tony.
They were a pair of Vivo barefoot shoes. They really were. They're amazing. They're minimalist, they're eco-friendly, and they're designed to let your feet move as freely as they would barefoot. It's about getting closer to nature with every step you take. They really are amazing shoes. They come in ranges for men's, women, for all aspects, kids.
They're a B Corp company, which means they're certified as being people working in a sustainable manner. Amazing people. We've hung out with them loads, and they really are at the forefront of health.
We believe in them so much that we become ambassadors. It's all we've worn for the last 8 years, for running, for streetwear, for, they're
even tuxedos. When I wear a tuxedo, I got a nice kind of formal pair. So they do offer a full range. Use the code HAPPYPAIR20 to get 20% off your next pair.
And even as soon as I've got a baby girl, Fia, she's 8 months old. And as soon as she starts walking, I will definitely make sure she starts with a pair of Vivo barefoot shoes because they have a wide toe box, a minimal sole, and they'll really help connect her with nature and her natural movement.
Research has shown that if you do wear a pair of Vivo barefoot shoes within a number of months, your foot strength will increase by 60%.
So check them out, 20% off with the code HAPPYPAIR20 at checkout, vivobarefoot.com.
Yeah, I mean, I think happiness involves being surrounded by loving people and, energy and empowerment and consciousness. I think that's really, what would be called winning the game of life. And so it's strategic to empower people because that facilitates your own happiness.
Yeah, 100%. One thing I want to kick it off, Dan, with, I love all this and I could spend all day talking philosophy with you because this is kind of our sweet spot. But I think we should talk about...
make it relevant
your
to people
remarkable work. In terms of
Tell people why they're talking to me. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Soil. Many people think soil is dirt. They think it's mud. They think it is just.
It's an inanimate object. It's just something that just happens to be there that you wipe off your boots and
where there's more research talking about how the quality of our soil dictates the quality of our consciousness, our awareness, our health. I wonder if you could talk briefly about soil just to create a context about how it is so fundamentally important to all life.
Well, I differentiate between dirt and soil. I would call dirt that inanimate matter, which has relatively low levels of life in it, which is not a place where life is flourishing. And I would call soil the brilliant, vibrant, massively populated ecosystem of amazing individuals that are part of life flourishing. So it's the bottom of the food chain in many cases. We talk about animals being top of the food chain and plants being the middle of the food chain. Some people are taught that plants are the bottom of the food chain and the herbivores are the middle and the carnivores are the top. When I went to school, we learned that the microbes were the bottom of the food chain. And so, or you can think about a pyramid. You can only have so many animals as you've got plants to support them. You can only have as many plants as you've got microbes to support them. So, when you manage your soil like dirt, then the relative level of life that can occur from that is low, and in many, many different ways, nutritionally, ecologically, microbiomatically, and so, foundationally, I think what we're here to do, again, going up, I guess maybe a bit back to the philosophical, is we be caretakers of the land. That's what the Native Americans, how they saw the role of the human animal. And wolf had its role and chipmunk had its role and crow had its role. But, the human's role was caretaker. And there's a real nice connection there between how well our land is functioning and how well we're functioning. It connects to human health, connects to environmental system function, consciousness, gut health. Where does it not connect?
Yeah, I agree. And we were walking before this and we were just discussing and we were kind of saying that, like, when you look at your work with the Bionutrient Institute, the Bionutrient Food Association, you kind of go like, okay, well, if you look at the current food system that prioritize, quantity over quality, it prioritizes things that look good and yields over the actual nutrient content and the health promoting of the food, of the plant, of the farm, of the soil to nature. Like, the context seems to be very different. And your context is fundamentally different. Could you talk about what your philosophy is in terms of food, the food system, and in terms of what I just said there?
Yeah, we'll dig in somewhere. So I've been running this organization called the Bionutrient Food Association for almost 15 years now. And our mission has been to increase quality in the food supply. And by quality, we're talking about flavor and aroma and nutritive value, health-giving attribute, which we think connects to soil health and environmental system function and things. So increasing quality. And that then implies that there's a variation in quality, that some carrots are good and some carrots are not. Some milk is good, some milk is not. There's a continuum in nutrient levels in food, which, according to what you find on the back of a package, it'll say 8% of your protein and 14% of your vitamin D or whatever it is per serving. All those numbers are well, they're not measured. So they're averages, and they're relatively low. So we've done a bunch of research now over the past 7 or 8 years, and I'll just give you examples for carrots as an example. When we looked at the level of sulfur in carrots, just one element in one crop, some carrots had as much sulfur as 4 other carrots. So we had a 4x variation. When we looked at phosphorus, it was an 8x variation. When we looked at polyphenols, it was a 20x variation. When we looked at antioxidants, it was a 40x variation. So this carrot has as many antioxidants in it as those 40 carrots. And that's the range of nutrients that we found in crops. And when you see a label on a package, it says it's this number. And so what we're saying is there's a massive range, and we want to help the quality of the food supply be higher, as in most of things are in the bottom 25th, or well, 80% of the sample is below the 50th percentile in general. So if, here's 1, here's 100, the vast majority of what's available in the supply chain is relatively quite poor.
Wow.
I feel like I'm explaining it in a not intuitive fashion.
No, but so that would constitute. So this morning I was in the supermarket just across the road, Super Value, and I went in there. There was a bag of carrots for €1. There was a kilo bag of carrots for €1. There was a head of broccoli. It was 120. There was a punnet of tomatoes. It was €2, and I'm going, okay, they look nice, they look good, but I've got there's no kind of, I don't know if they're nutrient rich or not. There's also organic stuff there. How can you discern like whether something is nutrient or not? How is there any means of doing that right now?
Well, that's part of the massively complicated research project we've been working on for the past 8 years. And, what is quality? If what is 1 at and what is 100? If you're developing a 1 to 100 scale, how do you define that? And it involves looking at hundreds of different nutrients and compounds in a crop, and looking at hundreds of samples of that crop, and looking at the microbiome of that crop, and looking at the management practices, and then doing human health trials to be able to say this carrot is 40 out of 100, this carrot is 20 out of 100, requires some pretty complex research. Foundationally, what we've been doing for the past number of years is building that whole thing out so that there can be a scale. I like to use the example of Richter. Before Richter came along and made a scale, people are like, yeah, did you hear did you feel the rumble? Like, yeah, it was big. No, it was small. Like, how do you know? Before
As
we
in
had
the Richter scale of earthquakes or whatnot, yeah.
Before we had Celsius, somebody said it was warm out. Somebody said it was not warm out. But he developed 1 in 100. Freezing water and boiling water. There's your 1 in your 100. And so, right now we don't have actually a scale to define quality in food. What we found is that variations are massive. 2x, 5x, 10x in the minerals, 20x, 40x, et cetera, in the secondary metabolites. But there's hundreds of different nutrients in every crop. So how do you take the hundreds of different nutrients in carrots and average them out and say, this is the rough definition of 80 out of 100 or the rough definition of 20 out of 100? That's a complicated project. Right now, the refractometer you got is actually the best tool we've got.
Because the way a refractometer works is that I can measure the total dissolved solids, or in essence the bricks or the sugar quantity in something, which is the plant's ability to synthesize sunlight into glucose, which will feed the microbiome in the soil and ultimately develop nutrients to the plant. I'm more saying that just to check, am I correct in saying that?
Well, you started off perfect and then went off. So it's total dissolved solids or degrees Brix is what it measures. And it's not just, it's calibrated percent sucrose, but it's not really measuring that, because you can get a Brix reading on battery acid or vinegar, neither of which have, or gasoline. You can get a Brix reading on a lot of things, salt water. The total dissolved solids correlates with how much stuff, how much activity, how much nutrients are flowing in the system. So certainly the sugar is one of those components. But yeah, as far as people on the ground having practical experiences with their tongues and watching plants grow and monitoring pest and disease resistance and things like that, the Brix refractometer seems to correlate brilliantly with quality. As far as having a peer-reviewed published definition that you can make claims about from a nutritional standpoint that can be made on pack and things like that, that's what we're doing, is taking it to the next level. So, and
to give a context for anyone listening, like the average Brix, for example, if you go into a supermarket, might be somewhere between 1 and 5, for example. Whereas
for what
Brix for in terms of sweetness, like Brix it'll typically be associated with sweetness. Whereas we've grown carrots certainly that have a 12 and a 16, and they have a much higher sweetness, which typically represents better nutrition. Is that correct?
I would say flavor,
yeah.
Well, with nutrition, there's simple sweet, and you can get some Honeycrisp apples or sweet corn is bred to have high levels of sugar in them. That's not necessarily high levels of nutrition. It's really about think about how people pay attention to coffee or wine or chocolate, and they're always looking at those sort of notes and sort of flavors, right? It's the flavor of the carrot. Like how carroty was that carrot? You can have you could have a sweet carrot, but it's usually those secondary metabolites that we call flavor and aroma, which correlate with a much more comprehensive nutritional profile.
So what is this for anyone listening? So you said that word twice, and I'm sure people listening are going, what's a secondary metabolite, Dan?
Yeah. Well, you may have heard of polyphenols or terpenoids or alkaloids. They're basically the things that cause mint to smell like mint, or
Caffeine
turmeric
and
to smell like
coffee.
turmeric, so all these sort of, they're complex, really long chain compounds that correlate with flavor and aroma for us. And why that's important is because we are wired with a really sophisticated nutrient monitoring system to tell us what's good for us and what's not. We shouldn't need an external instrument. We've already got a really sophisticated one, and it's one we've evolved with. So it's nature's instrument. And so if something has a stronger, more complex, more potent flavor, that means it's more nutritious. That's basically what it comes down to. So a sweet carrot is different than a flavorful carrot, if that makes sense.
So ultimately, like
Those are what plant metabolites are. Those things we call flavor and aroma: essential oils, medicinal compounds, anti-cancer, antifungal.
wow. So ultimately, it's like we have our tongue and our nose, or the olfactory glands in our nose, has the ability to detect taste and flavor, which ultimately means higher nutrition. And we've evolved from this, that like more flavorful foods equal more nutritious foods. However, with the advent of the industrial food system, we now have fat, salt, additives, preservatives, artificial flavorings, which are kind of hijacking this biological, very important human survival mechanism.
Evolutionarily very sophisticated and relatively and extremely important, right? It's what connects to resistance to chronic disease. The reason we're falling apart is because we're eating food that's insufficient, and biochemically we don't have what we need to function, and so nature's taking us out. I mean, there's a direct, so yeah, I mean, I don't call it food, I call it junk. Those processed products, right? Let's Junk and food, it's like love and hate. It's like, I don't know, night and day. They're two different things. It's like junk and food. This is junk, this is food. This processed product, you are what you eat, will turn you
Into a processed human.
junk, functionally junk, spiritually, emotionally, hormonally, physiologically, microbiologically. Like, it's all beautifully interrelated, and nature gave us everything we need to function well. And we're in the system now where people have been basically removed from nature, and they're living in these faux realities. And the farther away you get from nature, the more she takes you out. I mean, it's called evolution. You stay in harmony with nature, and you evolve, and you continue, and you get out of harmony with nature, and you devolve, and it's really actually quite simple.
But often common sense, it's not very common. And often the simple things are the harder things for many of us to grasp.
And I was just going to say, I'd love to hear your direct kind of perspective on the common food system, because it sounds like I know your philosophy, like I really, really do, and I believe in it so much. But I'd love for anyone listening, like, what are your views as someone who grew up on an organic farm and has been an organic farmer yourself for almost 3 decades? Like, what's your perspective on the current food system? Because you didn't, you were born into a homestead, an organic homestead, and you've just carried the mantle throughout your life.
Which is part of what's given me the capacity to do so, I think, is the fact that I grew up in relatively close touch with nature, eating good food and not, in front of a screen. And I think it's called epigenetics. Environmental conditions affect genetic expression, and the more your environmental conditions support your genetic expression, the more functional you are. And I think that's a large part of why I've been able to do as much as I have, is because of how I was raised. Yeah, I mean, on the farm, when growing up, we what did we buy? Beans and rice and flour, salt, pepper, a couple things. But all of our vegetables we grew and ate fresh and frozen, canned, and our meat we raised and slaughtered and froze, and our fruit and dairy and I mean, making yogurt, making cheese, and milking the cow by hand, and the whole thing. So I I think Michael Pollan, who's a famous author, said at one point in time, if your grandmother wouldn't recognize it, it's not food. Um, and maybe at this point in time, we need to say your great grandmother. But I think since the advent of the um, industrialization of food, the sort of the commercial manufacture of food, um, we've gotten more and more food-like substances, junk, processed product, call it what you will, that physiologically, biochemically, nutritionally is relatively detrimental, not processed well by the system. And you should not expect to function well if what you're building your body out of is not what nature would recognize as food. So there's indigenous cultural traditional wisdom from all continents, which tell us how to process our meat and make your salami, process your vegetables and make sauerkraut, process your grain and make sourdough, process your dairy and make kefir. It doesn't matter particularly what you're eating or not eating, always sprouting your seeds and nuts, never eating them, roasted or just cooking them directly because they got the phytase inhibitors. There's all these traditional cultural practices which could be integrated into products on the supermarket shelf if companies want to take the opportunity to actually produce food that would make people's bodies function well. But right now, it's not being done. Right now, that's not the mentality of the system. So we should expect, yeah.
It seems like we've got our food system wrong like that. And your work has almost flipped a paradigm shift in me, and that so many of us, at least living in urban environments, will spend a lot of their time looking at that and going, I won't eat that, that's got processed this, I won't eat that, that has, refined sugars in it, versus your approach is much more is like, what's the nutrition in that food and what's the nutrient per calorie ratio? Like, it's like, what soil was that food grown in? Because ultimately that's the determinant of the quality and the nutrients that are going to be bioavailable in that food.
Well, I think it's yes and. One thing I started off with after sort of I'm like, duh, lacto fermentation is better and whole foods are better. And, all that kind of, like, I grew up with that assumption about what the foundational nature of the supply chain should be. And I was critiquing the supply chain by saying, look, most of the carrots that are out there are pretty crappy. And like, wouldn't you like to know, if you're buying carrots, which ones are the better ones? And that's what I've been doing a lot of work on. But then you can take a very high quality, well-raised, grain of wheat and take the bran off and grind it without sprouting it and, add some agents which will make it rise fast. And it's not going to be nutritionally beneficial, even though it was potentially well grown to begin with, because you didn't do the second half of the processing and cooking in a proper way. So what I'm coming back to now is like, oh my God, fruits and vegetables are nice, and meat and dairy and grain and whatever raw beans, whatever raw ingredients are, but most people aren't eating that. Most people are eating processed products. So yes, variation's massive, but also how you take that raw crop and what happens to it between when it was harvested and your plate really matters also.
Yeah. Like, in terms of just to reiterate what you said there earlier, just for anyone listening who missed it, like, what I understood what you said there was that, like, when I walk into a supermarket, from the plants which you've measured so far, such as carrots, the vast majority of them are between the 15th percentile and the 50th or the 40th percentile. 80% of them are typically, nutrient deficit.
Exactly.
They aren't rich in nutrition. So the assumption would be, for anyone going into supermarket shopping, people go, oh, they look great, they look brilliant, wow, and they're only €1 a kilo, amazing. But the reality is that it's almost like a symptom of our culture nowadays. It looks great, it really looks fantastic and it's great value, but it mightn't have the substance which we're looking for in terms of nutrition,
which has to do with the aesthetic, the facade. People spend a lot of time with what they look like and what's their substance. I mean, you can look at culture, you can look at politicians, you can look at media. I mean, where do you want to look? We're being conned into looking at the surface and thinking that, complete uniformity is attractive, instead of looking deep and looking for nuance and complexity and intensity. So, yeah.
You the man, Dan. You the man. Genuinely.
In terms of, I want to go, like many of us can get caught up with that's organic, that's conventional, that's regenerative, that's biodynamic. There's all these different labels. And organic is one which we'll often go, great, it's not sprayed with poisons, it's not sprayed with chemicals, which is better than conventional. However, how do we start to move more towards a system that values the nutrients in food and that can actually determine that this one is good and this is bad? And I know you've been doing lots of work on this wonderful device, a spectrometer.
Spectrometer.
Spectrometer, yeah. Well, so that's, the refractometer is the best tool we've got right now. The vision is that we want to have a reality where consumers can assess nutritional levels in food at point of purchase with a flash of light. So, in my sort of end game vision, one of the cameras in your smartphone is a spectrometer, and Apple builds one into their iPhone, and Google builds one into their Pixel, and Samsung builds one into their Galaxy, and they're all calibrated to this database of quality. And so you can go to your 3 bags of carrots and you flash a light at one of the carrots in one of the bags, and you get 20 out of 100. And you flash the next one. It's 3 different, companies, brands, whatever. Next one's 40, the next one's 80. That's the end game, as far as I'm concerned. Because if we can get to that point, that means that transparency from an economic standpoint will be aligned with nutrient levels. And so our assumption is if people understand that variation is 2x or 5x or 20x, and not everybody even has to do it. If the word gets out that Stonyfield milk is better than Organic Valley's milk because 25 people have checked, then our thought is a lot of people can start buying Stonyfield and leaving Organic Valley, or the other way around, or whatever the company is, because that science has gotten out there and people actually care about their children and themselves, and this is meaningful and important. So yeah, the idea is that we have a functioning spectrometer that is able to be used, which connects to nutrient levels, and then it incentivizes the supply chain shift. So if we have companies that are having their carrots stay on the shelf or their milk stay on the shelf because it's nutritionally inferior, and they're getting a reputation for nutritional inferiority, then they're going to go to their producers and say, hey, we actually are going to only now buy from you if you can hit this mark. And so we apply economic incentive to shift the nature of the food supply chain. Because money drives the world to some decent degree, even though we'd like to think that more, grand and idealistic, aspects are actually what's driving it. It seems like economic incentive is a big piece of the puzzle. So if we can end up with a reality where people have that capacity, our thought is the feedback through the supply chain will be massive and shift the way we engage land through farming, which is the vast majority of how we humans affect land, which will have very positive implications on climate and ecosystem function, and farm viability will obviate the need for agrochemicals and fertilizers. Potentially we're obviating the need for pharmaceuticals as well. You create a reality where, because the economics have shifted, the industries that are having a negative effect are making less money, right? We don't fight the problem. We create a reality where that problem is no longer exists. If you're producing high quality food because you're working with nature, which is giving you a premium, which is, connects with lower cost of production, and you're not buying fertilizer, you're not buying insecticides, and a bunch of people are doing that, then there's a lot less money going into that industry. And so then they have a much less strong ability to affect the political dynamics, right? And the policies and all that kind of stuff. So we understand money drives the system. How do we do a jujitsu with that and use money to, align with nature?
It's brilliant. It really is.
It really is. And just to make it really obvious for people listening, because you're linking, like, your capacity to go to clouds and dirt is really, really incredible, to go to big macro things and then back down to the micro. For anyone who's listening that might have missed that, my understanding, you can validate if I've understood it right here, is that by focusing on nutrient density, it means that the farming practices have to prioritize healthy soil
Yep.
that's nutrient dense, which is typically not going to be via herbicides or pesticides or fertilizers. It's going to have to be natural practices, natural processes, because this is where flavor and nutrients are created. And then as a result, the plant has these healthy nutrients, and therefore the human gets these healthy nutrients, and it kind of compounds, and you got healthy soil, healthy food, healthy human, healthy planet.
Healthy culture. I mean, I would say our culture is to a large degree negatively impacted by these economic forces. And so if we shift the economics and create a dynamic where those countervailing economic forces are much weaker, then we can envision a much more harmonious culture as well. Especially if we're getting people out of the cities and onto the land. And, my thought is, 2 hectares, 5 acres is all anybody should need to be totally self-sufficient and independent. And why not aim for that now instead of theoretically waiting until you're 60? Imagine being independent and self-sufficient on just a little plot. 5 acres is not that little, actually. It's plenty of land. But
it's big,
land tenure, land access, we don't,
And then, Dan, your spectrometer, how far away are you away from some degree of a product release? Because I know you're on Mark II now, and you've been playing around with it for a while. And how far away are you from this coming out? Because even as soon as I've heard about it, I'm like, can I buy one? And I went trying to buy one yesterday, or can we get one from Dan when we're talking to Dan? Because it's something that I think has the capacity to shift the way society appreciates food. It's a measurement.
You couldn't buy it on your website, on the Bionutrient Food Association. It says that you can't buy them. So
let me explain. Yeah, so it's one thing to build a spectrometer. It's another thing to define quality. Like I said about Celsius and Richter, until we had a Celsius scale, you couldn't build a Celsius thermometer. Until you had a Richter scale, you couldn't build a Richter, what are they called? Seismograph.
Okay, yeah, that's very good.
Right? The technical tool, the thermometer or the seismograph. Well, so until we've defined nutrient density, we can't have a nutrient density meter. And so with each crop, we need to define nutrient density, and that's a scientific project, which, our first swing at it's taken about $1 million. We hope we can go down to $250,000 per crop subsequently, but that'll be $250,000 for wheat, $250,000 for apples, $250,000 for carrots, for blueberries, for chickpeas, right? Because each crop is unique, we have to study it, and we have to come up with a definition for what quality is in that crop. And only after you've done that can you build a meter that's calibrated to whatever that.
This is good. This is bad. This is.
So you need to go. How many crops is that in total? Like if you're talking about chickpeas and lentils and peas and sugar snap peas and bananas and pears and the full.
How many tens of millions of dollars is really the question. And yeah, I mean, we could do one that just was wheat and oats and rye and rice. Then you could do one that was, black beans and navy beans and cannellini beans and whatever, spotted turtle beans. So if you want to have meter that does a certain thing, and just nuts and seeds, boom, spend $1 million on just nuts and seeds, and they have a meter for them. If you want to do one that has fruits and vegetables and roots and leaves and nuts and dairy and meat, then you have to do all the research first. So spending a lot of money. So we did our first work starting in 2017 was to verify if it was true that nutrient variations were massive. We thought they were. If it was true that those variations connected to soil health as opposed to variety or soil type, we thought it connected to soil health. And 3, if it was possible to build a handheld consumer price spectrometer that you could use to flash a light at a crop and get a meaningful scientific reading off from it. And we did a bunch of research starting in 2017, ending in 2021, and we basically concluded, yes, nutrient variations are massive, they connect to soil health, and you can build meters that can get a consumer price point that, with a flash of light, can get readings. We only had readings for polyphenols or antioxidants or, protein or things like that because that's all we were testing for. We didn't actually have a definition of quality. The first question is, how big is variation? And can you build a meter that tests variation honestly? So we figured that out. We sold a few hundred meters around the world. And now we've been working to define quality in a crop. And we chose beef as the first crop to do because it's the crop with the world's largest ecological and economic footprint. More acres of the world are spent on the production of beef than anything else. And more dollars are spent, euros, yen, pounds, whatever. And so we're almost done with beef. And then wheat is our next one. And we're hoping that we can do it for $250,000 instead of for $1 million because we figured out what we're doing. Doing it the first time. If you don't know what you're doing, you got to figure it out. So
amazing.
It's a process.
How far away do you see it that we'll be able to buy ones on your website,
Or
even have it on our phones?
My phone.
Well, I'm talking to some guys in about an hour and a half that are working on building one for beef because that's what we have the data for. That would be going to the supply chain first. So, by the end of the year, there could be a beef one that people in the supply chain can use that might cost $5,000 or $10,000. It would just work for beef. When does Apple or Samsung or Google want to be first mover in this and start working with us? We're talking a couple tens of millions of dollars to figure this whole thing out, which is basically nothing considering the global implications of it. So it's a rounding error for any of those big tech companies that wants to put one of these sensors into their phone. Until then, we're going to keep going at our grassroots, word of mouth, open, honest, go with the flow, Taoist strategy. So
amazing.
I think if big money wants to get involved, it'll happen rapidly. And until big money gets involved, it'll keep going at a organic speed.
Here was a good question from Chris. Why haven't Big Ag made this type of tool readily available, given that there is economic pressure that people will pay for more flavor? Or is it just that people want cheap, but there's also people that want flavor?
Well, Big Ag doesn't produce flavor.
Yeah, very good.
The quality of the things they produce is quite low, and that's not their. They're looking for uniformity and margins and
volume.
They're not looking for nutrition. They could, and anybody could. This is the market opportunity is massive here. We're definitely in conversations with a few decent sized companies, pretty decent sized companies that see that they could have a market advantage if they were first movers in the space. So I think it's really about getting those first first movers in the space. And then what do they say? Everybody wants to be first to be second.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
Okay. And what are, even just to delve slightly deeper into it, for anyone who's listening who's kind of curious and going obviously you've said there's huge variance between the nutrition of certain foods, the nutrient density within it. What are some of the assumptions or your understandings of what leads to it?
Right now, it looks like it's the amount that the thing it grew in was soil and not dirt.
Okay.
We started off talking about dirt and soil and the level of life in it and how it connects to everything else. And it looks like the more your soil is alive, the more different species of microbes, the different kingdoms, the more flourishing symbiotic dynamics, polycultures, everything, the more alive your system is, the more nutrition there is in the food. That's really what it seems to connect to.
Wow. It seems so simple. Like life creates
Almost
life.
self-evident.
Almost, but obviously.
Diversity and complexity and nuance correlate with diversity and complexity and nuance.
Wow.
Yeah,
life creates life. Wow. Okay, that's quite simple. I get it.
An obvious.
Oh my God! What a revelation! Who's this guy?
Who's this genius?
Hey, sometimes the most simple things are hard to see. That way. An obvious question, but again, one that I feel a need to ask. Over the last 20 years, there's been a massive rise of allergies, huge amount. And we've had a cafe restaurant for over 20 years now. And we first started, you get the odd person allergic to dairy. Now there are 9, even 11 allergens, and every day you get someone in with something different. And even growing up, there was one person in our school who used to be allergic to eggs. One person. That was all I knew with an allergy. It's like, what's an allergy? Whereas nowadays, my kids can't go in with any nut, and it's
strawberries
widespread.
Or kiwis, you can't go in with. There's a lot of this type of thing.
Is there any research to back up that as soil has degraded, has an increase of allergies?
Well, the problem is research. The problem is there's research here, research here, research here, research here, which all prove logical pieces of the puzzle, but none of them actually ties it all together into one thing. So, yeah, I mean, the level of toxins in the food, how glyphosate has been used in the grains to pull out the cobalt and the manganese and the copper and zinc, which are critical enzyme cofactors, which are necessary for your microbiome to function, and your microbiome can't function, so then you can't digest these certain things, but then they were ultra high temperature processed. You take real milk and you fry it, which is what ultra high temperature processing is, and it's completely biochemically different. It is not the thing that came out of the cow or the thing that should have soured or fermented, in how we would have indigenously done it. So, God, yes, because we've been eating crap for generations, which has been getting to be more and more crap, and more and more generations. Epigenetics, again, what your mother ate has something to do with how healthy you were when you were born, and what her grandmother was eating also is part of that conversation. So we're now 3 or 4 generations into this, what we now call conventional ag, which is toxins, chemicals,
Processed people.
And we're degenerating. Like I made the point before, we will literally physiologically, be unable to reproduce. We'll die young, not be able to reproduce. This is what's occurring because we're out of touch with nature. When you begin to not be in harmony with nature, you begin to die. It can be totally reversed rapidly. You get a new body every 6 months, whatever, bones take 7 years, blood takes 2 weeks, average it out. You get a new body every 6 months. It's entirely possible to turn this thing around, but we've been going in the wrong direction for 75, 80 years now. And this is the effect of it. They've done this with farm animals, lab animals in the 50s. You take a healthy pig and you feed her next 3 generations poorly, and you get not healthy pigs. And that's where we're at.
Wow.
And you feed those 3rd generation unhealthy pigs well, and boom, they can reverse that. You can totally reverse that. But understand where we are in the continuum.
Yeah, 100%.
Jesus, incredible. I feel my mind is blown. I'd love to get down to some concrete stuff, because we're sitting here with Chris, our head grower, and he's been salivating over this conversation for
here's
weeks.
His next question. Here's his question, which he has just handed me here now. We want to focus on taste and nutrient density on our farm. It sounds like we won't have your sexy meter, your spectrometer in the next while. So how best do we go about measuring progress? Is it using this refractometer? How do you suggest we?
Refractometer is a brilliant thing to use. Yep, once a week. Same time every week, 7 o'clock on Tuesday morning, whenever it is, get out there and get a Brix reading of every crop you've got and see what the numbers are. And 12 is your target. And if you're at 4 or 5, you're normal.
12 is our target.
12 is your target in terms of as an indicator for the nutrient density, as a very, gross, as in
the leaf of the plant while it's growing. The corn leaf that's making the corn, ear, the tomato leaf that's making the tomato fruit,
so that's in the leaves of the plant. So not in the fruit. So not in the fruit.
Well, you check the fruit at the end to see how good of a job you did. But if you want to know what the result's going to be, you monitor the plant health as it's growing. If the Brix readings are high in the leaf while it's growing, then that'll correlate with high Brix readings in the crop when it's harvested. Wow. You're not going to have low Brix readings in the leaf and have high Brix readings in the crop. So, yeah, 12 is your target. If my leaf Brix readings in my crops are 12, then I should feel like, hold my head high, I'm doing a good job. If my leaf Brix readings are 3, 4, 5, I should understand that I'm totally normal.
And to increase the Brix reading, it's really, where do we start with there? Is that down to the remineralization of the soil, the aeration of the soil, the water retention in the soil? Is it those kind of foundational things?
Air, water, food, minerals, microbes, I say when I get my 2-day course. Yeah, you can find my extended rants on YouTube. I do a 12-hour stand-up show. I call it a Principles of Biological Systems, Dan Kittredge, YouTube. You'll find it.
It's broken down into 9 parts.
There's various versions that are 7 or 8 or 9, or I'm not sure. But yeah, it's been recorded numerous times. Actually, it was just recording in Ireland, not a week ago. No.
I know. I heard you were here, and I was like, I hope I get to meet him.
I can't believe we missed you, yeah.
I'll be back in June.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Well, I want to meet you.
Back in Ireland in June?
Yeah.
Where are you in June?
Wexford, I think it is.
Wow. Where are you at there?
On a farm teaching a course.
Wow, amazing. Okay, we'd love
I
to
want to
do-
meet you. I'd
Yeah.
love
Second
to
half.
meet you.
Come on down. Come on down.
And even
Yeah.
can you take an extra day and come stay with us and visit?
We'll
It's
put you up
tight.
and feed you, and
I'm always on the lookout for that $20 million we need to pay for the definition of nutrient density, which will get us over the hump to be able to have meters to shift the world. So,
Yeah, brilliant.
so it's making links, networks, people with networks that can find 20 million to get the.
Well, anyone listening there who's got a spare 20 million. Anyone listening, just to put it out there to our audience, anyone listening today who
Where
has
do they
a spare
wire it
10
to?
or 20 million.
I got to talk about 3 now. Okay, we're live. I should be careful what I say. No, where do you
Bank
wire it
number,
to?
Did you sign it by
blah, blah.
email?
Is where you can go to the donate page, bionutrient.org. We're a 501c3 in charitable nonprofit educational organization.
Okay, that's nice.
The grassroots strategy is $5 a month. And if you, any person who thinks this is important, we need 100,000 people. So $5 a month, sign up, put your money where your mouth is, consider it a tithe to the Church of Nature, and see if you can get 10 other people to do it. The grassroots, I've been looking for big dollar donations for a long time, and we've gotten a number of decent ones, but really this should be bottom
key farming
up.
practice
So onion cheek.
Say that. Sorry, I cut you off there.
I would be
Sorry.
putting it down there. Was all I'm saying. On this, if I did have an extra day on this trip, my priority.
Okay, well, I'll send you an
priority
email
is
and
to go
try
down
to.
to Ballymena.
Yeah,
but
we'll try
that hasn't been set
to.
up
We'll
yet.
try to
So-
see if we can
Sway the
convince you to
water.
visit us. Yeah, exactly.
We'll just talk, we'll think of friends which we have, which we could host to
Facilitate.
dinner.
Or we
Put on a
put out-
dinner with people with deep pockets.
Great.
Great.
That would
Okay,
be
we're
something I
learning.
would definitely make time for. A salon, like a good 2-3 hour conversation.
And then a talk.
You can
a
have
15-minute talk.
hors d'oeuvres and drinks and a meal. Enough time to have a real serious conversation for let me explain what we're doing and why we're doing it, where we're at.
Okay, well, we can work
That
on
would be the kind of event I would love to
Dan,
do.
key farm
Absolutely.
practice to turbocharge progress. So say, for example,
Brilliant.
we're doing our brick score and we've decided we're going to do it every Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. Chris is out there. We measure the leaf of everything and we're getting in a 5 and we're like, shit, we want to get up to 12. Is it kind of like, what are the key things that you would focus on? Okay, there you are. There you are. There's no short letter.
That's what I said I got a 12-hour stand-up show for. It's a paradigm shift. You have to understand that it's a living system, and you have to understand what that living system needs to function more well. So it may be may be thirsty. It may be hungry. It may be having a hard time breathing. It may be, any number of
Self-diagnosed.
things. And so you have to be able to get to the point where you can be proactively providing everything that nature needs. Which, it's once you
no,
get to the
and how
other
long
side
does
of
it
the rainbow. It's not very hard. It's what indigenous cultures have been doing for millennia without PhDs, without science, without labs. There is actually a piece of it, which is the subtle connection in conversation. If you can go that far and talk about how we have the capacity to communicate with life, then that will make it a lot easier. But most of us have those functions.
And another obvious question,
not
probably
as
we're
well
getting
developed
close
as
to
we'd
the
like
end of
them to
time,
be.
but- and
So
it's probably obvious, but I'd love your take on it. Quality of the food we're eating and the degree of our consciousness.
So nutrient density and consciousness.
And conscious
Obviously,
nutrient
consciousness is a hard one to define as well. But I
maybe
guess
it's awareness, one's awareness.
our awareness and our empathy and our capacity to be stewards for life on the planet Earth. Go for it.
got a whole rant on that. Was that okay? um, well,
This is
it takes a
important.
couple minutes. Let's just say, ever been to a
No.
elementary school band concert?
Fun.
No. Can you imagine what it might be like to have a bunch of 7 and 8 and 9 year olds
Chaos.
playing instruments? But imagine what it might sound like. Yeah, not necessarily beautiful harmony, right? Maybe a little bit of out of tune and stuff like that. Squeaks. Not like a beautiful. Imagine an a cappella choir, 4 voices singing perfectly in tune.
Yeah.
Right. maybe you've been to one of those kind of events, or maybe you mentioned it. Sometimes in that environment, something will happen, which is called an overtone will be heard. A fifth note, even though there's only 4 notes being sung, a 5th note becomes manifest. It's called a harmonic or an overtone in physics or music. And so to say it without going way down the rabbit hole with biochemistry and evolutionary, process and DNA and stuff like that, the thought is that we each have a vibe, and our vibe, is based on the things that our body's made out of. Like our DNA is a thing in chemistry, but it actually is vibrating in physics. Your hormones, everything we understand in physics is vibrating. The question is it vibrating like that elementary school band concert or like that beautiful a cappella choir? And your DNA, if you've got genetic markers, those genetic markers are little bits that are not vibrating in tune. So you start to sound a little bit out of tune, and maybe your hormonal system's not functioning right. You didn't have the right nutrients for that. So the more that our biochemistry, the compounds in our bodies vibrate out of tune, the less in harmony our vibe is. And I would argue that there's multiple levels of being. The physicists tell us that there's, I think it's 97% of reality they can't find. You sure about this one? Dark matter and dark energy? Like 95+% of the universe's stuff, the physicists can't find. They're like, we don't know where it is. It's somewhere we can't find. Everything from light to dark holes to planets to everything else, cosmic dust, that equates to about 3 to 5% of the weight of everything in the universe. There's something else out there which is massive, and we can't, with our physical tools, find it. I would argue that we are actually have the capacity to perceive on many levels with this organism that we're carrying around, this tool, this instrument, temple, I think it's called in some perspectives. So we can engage in an emotional reality, which doesn't exist on the physical plane per se. We can engage in a mental reality. We can engage in a energetic reality. We can engage in a spiritual reality. My hypothesis is that all these different realities are like octaves on the piano keyboard, and the physical plane is one octave, and the emotional plane and the mental plane and the energetic plane and the spiritual plane, those are all different octaves. And so if we're identifying primarily through our physical form, if our physical form is affecting our experience, the more harmonious it is, the more the overtones of consciousness will be able to be manifested, is how I would say it. So for me, this whole thing is a covert spiritual op. Spiritual, covert up, covert, yeah. The objective is to raise consciousness, and we do that by creating a dynamic where people's bodies are more coherent because we've increased quality in the food supply. And we've increased quality in the food supply by defining quality and building meters so we can apply this economic lever. So once we get the economic lever built and food starts to become better, then people will inherently become more well just because the nature of the food supply will be better. And so by doing that, we create a dynamic where people are more coherent, more functional, and then they are more well in all their engagements with life, their roles, whether professional or personal, or, I would say the more well we all become, the more well our culture will become, the more well our environment will become, et cetera. So I don't think we can succeed by looking outside of ourselves to fight this problem or fight that problem. I think we succeed by
good answer.
Dan for president. And so you got my vote, Dan. Dan for president. You link things so beautifully, so incredibly well. Like I'm blown away.
The first couple riffs and rants I was doing at the beginning of that
last one was great. That
so it's to help us all become overtoners, where we're all, we are the, we are
synergistic.
We are the cherry upon the apple of a beautiful harmony.
We're vibrating love. We're, that's the thing, is that the most selfish thing you can do is to experience love, which is complete coherence and unity and oneness. So the most selfish thing you can do is be coherent, is to feel good, to experience love, right? I mean, from a practical standpoint, is there anything else you'd rather
No, it sounds
do
great.
than
Yeah,
feel lots of love?
I'll follow that. Yeah.
I'm in.
So let's
Well,
start
you got
working.
you got two
it's a
disciples
step.
here,
We got some
Dan.
get work to do.
What do we do next, Dan?
Allies, spread the word.
We'll organise a
Allies.
dinner. We
Genuinely will. And Chris sent me a message there. You're organising a conference and
The Soil
pretty
and
soon.
Nutrition
And
Conference.
Chris is seeing if we can get some tickets because
get a free ticket.
Get one
to
free
attend,
ticket
because
for
we,
Chris.
as disciples, we want to learn. Learn the gospel.
As disciples, you want to take money
or the
from
church
the church.
invest in its educating
think
its.
There's many ways you can spin that one there down.
Okay. We are about to launch
Boom.
1 week from today, 1 week and 1 hour from now, actually. Will be the first the opening ceremony of the 16-week event, which will be going through the end of August. It's called the State of Nutrient Density, and we've got all the cutting edge people that are the agronomists, the researchers, the nutritionists, the certifiers, the labelers, the farmers, the consultants, people doing cutting edge stuff, game theorists in the movement. Just sort of here's where the state of the movement is. So anybody that wants to know what's going on and be part of the community and plug in, we're launching this global event. I mean, in 1 week. So if you go to bionutrient.org, again, there's a little banner on top, which is not totally sexy, but and under the events section.
And what does it cost? What does it cost
Soil
for people
Nutrition
to join?
Conference. It's $144 for a member. And again, membership is $5 a month. So, and then if you're not a member, it's $233. And I think pounds and dollars are pretty close right now. Euros and dollars.
And that's been online.
I think euros
so
and dollars
people
are
can do
almost
that from all
1 to 1
over
right
the
now.
world.
And it'll be in you're in GMT +1, so it'll be your
Okay, 68.
6 to 8. Every Tuesday evening, between 6 o'clock and 8 o'clock is when it'll occur.
And people
May
can watch it
14th
back if
to
they can't watch it live.
August 27th. If you are registered and you can't attend, you can watch the recording. But what the opportunity is to engage the presenter and ask your questions and be part of the global community of people that are in the conversation about what's going on and what their questions are, what's
Brilliant.
important to them, and
Really,
meeting
really
each other.
amazing.
So Dan, people who are
so-
equally want to be disciples in this movement,
That's-
number one, they can join bionutrition.org and pay $5 bionutrient.org. Okay, and you can donate $5 a month or €5 a month to help the cause to move more towards a nutritious world.
And if anyone's got 20 million, to just send you an email of where to send it to.
we can work on that. Any other bits, Dan? No books, nothing else? Anyone else who wants to learn more about your work, or just go to bionutrient.org?
Bionutrient.org is the basic website. Bionutrient Institute.org is where we have all the science, all the reports from all of our research there over the years. YouTube, if you actually want to learn about how to do these things, and we've been, for 10 years now, we've been having conferences, and we've recorded every single presenter, and we've got that all on our YouTube channel for free. So we really are thinking about the global smallholder, not just the Westerner, but the global smallholder, and making sure that everything we've captured, we've made freely available for the entire planet. So if you want to just go down a deep dive on learning principles and things like that, that would be a place to go. But the conference is going to be great fun, and
you're brilliant, Dan.
You're a
I
gift.
love this.
It was much
Brilliant,
appreciated.
Brilliant. You're a great laugh as well as remarkable human.
Thanks,
Dan. Thanks,
That was great crack.
Yeah, I really enjoyed
I
it.
love that. I
good
love
laugh.
that. What a laugh.